India right now under major metrics is considered to be a fast developing nation. The major metrics like GDP, GDP per capita, purchasing power parity see it among the top 5 countries. Considering the wealth that was taken away from the subcontinent under the hegemony of a multinational corporation in the form of the East India Company and following it the British Raj, India has really proved that it is able to stand up for itself. Indian sovereignty was rightfully the most moral issue of the later period of the British Raj as more and more Indians become conscious of the fact that the empire was not at all serving the interests of the people of the subcontinent that it was ruling. Indian independence, hence, is an affirmation of the fact that given the tools that the British Raj used, it can use that same system to serve towards the prosperity of the Indian population. This is really a huge achievement. The British Empire faced a major impact to its economical strength to run a global empire after the World War II. This was enough for the ruling classes of India to take advantage of the weakness of the British and then simply started taking the reign away from the British as the latter couldn't oppress the former anymore. The onus was now on the ruling class of India to distribute the economic benefits of the system all over a country that is so diverse and has never been this united before under the will of the people. As it has been true for any human group from time immemorial, the country now needed to start producing to try and sustain this new formed democracy. Albeit, what was new was its republican constitution, and the rest was simply handed over to them by the British. The aim was to redistribute as much wealth as possible, and also to the extent of investing in the development of infrastructure to improve the living standards of the Indians. Based on this, many national institutes were established that aim to create a new sector of specialists like engineers and doctors, etc. Cut to the present, it is more apparent now that in India the benefits of freedom and development have only benefited a few. A vast majority of the country is still trying to fight and struggle for a dignified and safe life without having to worry about the next day. Clearly, that will for sovereignty and its effect has only reached a few, and predictably so, because what gets questioned less in this country is about the nature of its still ancient social system that it has never sought to destroy. For the East India Company, it was more easier to create a class of bureaucrats within India who are able to act as intermediaries on behalf of the administration that wants to engage with the native population. This was the goal of the educational reforms brought about by Macaulay in the subcontinent. More importantly, the educational system mainly benefited the higher caste/class people in the subcontinent who had a much easier access in understanding English and the English culture. Subsequently, it was this group of people that have achieved sovereignty from the British and have simply replaced them as the ruling class of this new nation. Much of how it governs in its core has not changed much for at least 2 centuries. This is something which explains why India is, as a society still faces challenges from the colonial times. Essentially, the British co-opted the idealistic aspects of the native religions and its own caste structure of society to benefit their own economical needs and wants. It was primarily a great symbiotic system for exploitative purposes between the colonial masters and the erstwhile native feudal masters. India currently is in such a state of affairs where it is increasingly likely that the sovereignty and the republican constitution which it had created is now nearer to a possible collapse, a counter revolution. The constitution, even though is limited in its scope of economic rights, clearly discredits the caste system and it deems it illegal. If this document loses its significance, then even the bare minimum of expectation that we had of becoming a caste free society will be gone. The current ruling government looks to achieve the goal where it creates a state under the guidance of divine power, very specifically Hindu divine power, and to re establish the caste hierarchies as legal entities, that if one were to disobey it, they will be punished accordingly. It is nothing but an establishment of a feudal exploitative state that serves the interest of only who is capable of exploiting the most, which is which happened to the subcontinent more than 200 years ago. History always repeats itself. What I have experienced as someone from India is that Indians love to tell each other about their achievements. It is a kind of one-upmanship over a fellow Indian so as to feel superior about themselves while having the satisfaction of seeing someone else beneath them. This is a deep-seated logic within the society which organizes itself around this idea, thinking that this is how an individual progresses in their life. What is unfortunate about this is that the plans of development brought about during the very early years of independence got subsumed over this mentality, where noble professions like engineer and doctor, whose primary aim is to serve the society, now simply serve the vanity of an individual. That's why the development in India has only restricted itself to the well to do castes and classes. Even the downtrodden ones, when they achieve this education and become one of these noble professions, they become the target of jealousy from the privileged people rather than being inclusive about that big achievement. This restricts innovation because many who achieve this profession end up going to places abroad in the world who would take advantage of their skills, while the individual becomes more wealthier. We see that the ancient social structure is reflected in the scientific professions not as being beneficial to the society, but as a way to reach higher stages of vanity. Therefore, the economical impetus that a capitalistic scientific profession carry is transformed into an impetus to get more higher within the society. This shows that caste is not simply a creation to uphold a certain religious worldview. Caste is an economical system unto itself that keeps the religious view intact, and if that view falters, then it captures another worldview to continue its existence. That's why in India, even after the economic reforms, the far right and its insistence on the continuation of the existence of caste system has increased because unto itself it is a much more ancient form of exploitative system that only benefits those at the top, while the freeing tendencies of the capitalist system from its feudal counterpart is simply subsumed into itself. And this is also because of the fact that a lot of Indians practice religious acts throughout the year in such a way that they feel indebted to that religion as if to pay off some debt in being reborn as so and so caste member. The economics of this runs much deeper as its timeline exceeds that of the atheistic slash agnostic frame of control of the capitalist system, where they only have one life to accumulate as much wealth as possibly can be. The logic of debt within the Indian religions and the Indian caste system defeats the capitalist logic of having to take away the living subject from its feudal reality and hence then being controlled as free entities who are indebted to the capitalist system. What we see in India is nothing but two economical bases that organize the society. the capitalist system that creates the urban geography, and the caste system that connects the urban, the rural, and the state together in benefiting the people of the higher castes. The BJP realizes that through capitalist logic, it can make people believe that India as a whole is growing towards becoming a superpower, while in its domestic politics, it uses the caste politics to further its own agenda to reconstitute a Hindu society, which is their idea of social unity, i.e., a society on the basis of caste hierarchies by creating enemies through the means of fascist methods, influenced by the likes of Mussolini and Hitler, which is its own economical system. This has pretty much guaranteed its dominance in Indian politics. From this, we can gather that the point of contention simply is nothing but a fight for the reorganization of the Indian society, such that its production is something which benefits itself as a whole, and that what they gain from production gives them economic sovereignty, such that a democratic system actually benefits the well being of the whole society rather than a few. This is a point not mainly about the fact that one's freedom are the most valuable aspect of a society, but that one is also as equally valuable to the other as their work in terms of access to basic living conditions, i.e., economic freedom, which are mostly restrictive in a capitalistic system. To realize these freedoms means to actually be conscious of the fact that such a state of affairs is actually possible. The capitalist system and the caste system create a world of idealism where the human is born fatalistically and are a prey to their circumstances instead of making them realize their own freedoms. Both these systems prey upon the incapacities of individuals and beholden them to their imprisoning idealism. Even if the individual fights against this, they are in turn made to focus on disparate issues and are then made to believe in a concept of opposition that tends to celebrate individual victories over an overall change in the society, therefore defeating the purpose of getting together to revolt against such systems. And this is a symptom of the late stage capitalism known as postmodern condition, which has been trumpeted as the new form of opposition against oppressive systems. Instead, it actually makes it more easier for oppressive forces to gain control quicker. What India really requires is a new mode of thinking and action which actually deals with these systems materially. What India has always needed was a scientific revolution because India's production numbers compared to its counterparts are still so low for a country that is supposed to be growing quickly. It is not producing enough because of its ancient societal backwardness that keeps its worldview only to its own horizon. A scientific revolution within India would actually make its population disregard its feudal reality and adopt a new reality and a new consciousness that would prompt more and more of its people to produce by inculcating them in the production process and its intellectual rights as well. At the end of the day, caste system still relies on the principles of production, and these principles always remain objective, and how much ever idealistic spin one can put on it will never ever give up on those principles. That is the true reality of humanity, the reality of production, and producing for each other for a sustainable living. A scientific revolution can actually bring people from across different spheres of the society, and through that, one will be able to knit diverse issues together to build a coherent narrative, a coherent opposition against the evils of fascism, caste system, and capitalism.